Today we're diving into A.R. Barton's short story, Going Places. It's a really powerful story about that super thin line between dreaming big and, well, losing touch with reality. It makes you ask, what happens when the world in your head starts to feel more real than the one you're actually living in?
I mean, who hasn't, right? That feeling of wanting something more, something a little more glamorous, something that's just not this. Well, the main character in our story, a teenager named Sophie, practically lives in that feeling day in and out.
And this is how we first meet Sophie. She just comes right out with this huge declaration. And notice, it's not some vague, I wish kind of thing. It's a statement. She's not just dreaming about a different life, she's already building it in her mind right down to the last detail.
So let's start with our first section here, the girl who dreamed. This is where we really get into Sophie's #1 coping mechanism, her incredibly powerful and vivid imagination. But, to really understand why she dreams so big, you have to look at the flip side. And that brings us to a world of limitations. We need to see the harsh reality she's trying so hard to escape from. So, this is her future, or at least, the future that's been laid out for her and her friend Jancy. It's sensible, it's practical, and for a dreamer like Sophie, it's absolutely soul-crushing. The biscuit factory isn't just a job, it's a symbol of a life stuck on repeat, with no way out. And that's the very thing she's fighting against. Her family, though? Yeah, they're not much help. When Sophie shares even a little piece of her dream, this is what her dad says. It's just dripping with cynicism, right? It's so pragmatic, and it shows you how tough their financial reality is. For him, a boutique is just a fantasy. Any real money would have to go to a basic necessity, like a decent house. And the story just paints this vivid, almost suffocating picture of her home life. I mean, it's cluttered, it's steamy from cooking, dirty laundry everywhere. Her dad just sitting there, her mom worn down by work. The book says she feels a tightening in her throat, and you can totally see why. This isn't a place where dreams take flight, it's an anchor holding her down. So how does she deal with all of that? Well, she escapes, and that brings us to our next section, escaping into fantasy. This is where Sophie just builds a better, brighter world entirely inside her own mind. And a boutique is really just the start. She plays with other ideas too. Maybe she'll be an actress or a fashion designer. Anything she thinks sounds a bit sophisticated. Each fantasy is like a different costume she can try on, a different path to a life where people notice her. This contrast is really the heart of the story. On one side, you have the grim reality of her life, and on the other, this polished, celebrated world she's built, where a football hero takes the place of her exhausted father. It's just night and day. But this one becomes her masterpiece. It's not just a crush, it's a full-on story. She doesn't just admire the football star Danny Casey from the stands. Oh no, she imagines this personal, secret connection with him. And the first person she decides to tell is her quiet older brother Jeff. And just look at how she builds this story piece by piece. She gives her brother all these details, where they met, the color of his eyes, his mood. Each layer makes the story feel more and more real. Not just for Jeff, but for her too. She's literally living the story as she tells it.
But a fantasy this big, this vivid, it can't stay locked up in her head forever. And that brings us to our next part, when worlds collide. This is what happens when her private little world crashes right into her real one.
And there it is, her father's reaction. He doesn't just disbelieve her, he completely dismisses her. His question just shows you that this isn't the first time Sophie's told wild stories. To her family, this is just more of the same, and they're pretty tired of it. But then the tone shifts from just disbelief to an actual threat. Her dad sees her storytelling not as a harmless escape, but as a dangerous habit that's going to have real consequences. Suddenly, the fantasy isn't a comfort anymore, it's a source of conflict. And this is the moment she loses control. The secret that was supposed to be just for her and her brother is out. Her friend Jancy confronts her, and Sophie knows that if Jancy knows, the whole neighborhood is about to know too. So this leak forces a kind of confrontation, which leads us to our final section, the burden of a dream. Because now Sophie has to face the reality of her own story all alone. So to try and keep this fantasy alive, she actually goes to the spot she imagined. She waits by a canal in a place the story says is for those who wished not to be observed. The setting itself is perfect, right? It's a place for secrets, for lovers. She's directing the final act of her own imaginary movie. But as she sits there and time passes,
reality starts to creep in. This thought right here is the turning point. For the first time, she admits she feels pangs of doubt. Her total belief in her own story is starting to crack because, well, he's not showing up.
And when that beautiful fantasy finally collapses, it's replaced by this deep, profound sadness. This isn't just disappointment. The story calls it a hard burden. Think about that. The dream that was her escape has now become this source of real pain, a heavy weight that she has to carry.
So what's the big takeaway here? Well, Going Places is a really deep dive into teenage escapism. Sophie's story shows us that while dreaming can be a way to cope with a tough reality, it can also become a pretty dangerous trap.
And in the end, Sophie's story leaves us with this huge question. It kind of forces us to think about our own dreams. At what point does that amazing world we build in our minds stop being a safe place and start being a cage that keeps us from living in the real one?